So thank you for joining us for this Men's Health Connected event, which is a short, informal workshop on how to help a mate who's doing it tough. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands where we all join the meeting from today. If you want to share that in the chat box, you're very welcome. I'm joining from the lands of the Bunda people, the Balai, the Gureng, and the Gurang, which, for those who probably don't know, is in central Queensland, up between Gladstone and Bundaberg. So let's crack on. So thanks all for being here. Great to see so many people turning up for this this conversation. I'll give you a bit of background first before I hand over to Jonathan Bedlow. So for those who don't know, I'm Glenn Poole, CEO of the Australian Men's Health Forum. We've been running Men's Health Connected events since we were all forced online during COVID, with the help of Robin here, who's been a fantastic support. And we very much would like to get back to doing lots more face-to-face events, but I don't think there'll ever be a time when we don't do these online events, because look around the room, I can see people from Queensland, from Tasmania, from WA, from New South Wales and Victoria. I don't know if we've got people in South Australia and Northern Territory too, but we've all come together at a split second from across Australia to have this conversation. And so it's great to have the opportunity to do that online. So this particular conversation fits within a series that we're doing on social connection and men's health. And one of the first sort of tools we developed in this area was a guide we released on International Men's Day last year called How to Help a Mate Doing It Tough. I mean, put simply, it's kind of like one of those "Are you okay?" or assist or QPR type tools that I'm sure you've come across on how to have mental health first aid, how to have conversations with people. But we often find that they don't really take into account sort of the specific needs of blokes. They're just sort of gender neutral, how to have a conversation with everyone. And we think there's something missing there and something that we could add. So we developed that guide based on our own knowledge, but also we worked in consultation with lots of different people in the men's health sector to help us hone something which we think is a really sort of good beginner's guide to having meaningful conversations with blokes. So the guide is available to download online. We'll share the link in the chat box so you can download it if you haven't before. We're even now moving to the stage where if it's useful to you and you've got an organization in a workplace and you think you want to distribute some of these to colleagues or to clients or your community, then we can arrange for small numbers of around 50 or 100 to be printed and sent to you, but there'll be a small charge for that. So have a chat with me afterwards if that's of interest. But what we're going to do today is something we've not done before. We're going to try running it as a workshop and see how that works. So it's a pilot. So bear with us because we've never done it before. And because I like to lead from the front, I've asked Jonathan to do it all. Jonathan is a former president of the Australian Men's Health Forum. He's long time been serving, leading the Men's Resources Tasmania organisation in Tassie, has vast experiences, is trained up in suicide prevention training, vast experience of working with blokes and working in the suicide prevention space, and was really key to helping us develop this this guide. So I've asked Jonathan to lead this, and at this point I'm going to shut up. I'm going to hand over to Jonathan and let him take us through it. Thanks, Jonathan.
Thanks, Glenn. Great to be here, everybody. Great to see so many folks in our inaugural session with this little tool. So I'll just take a moment to get my screen up and shared. So hopefully that is there for you now. Great. All right. So before we head straight into actually talking about the guide, obviously, given the nature of the topic, although it's a fairly shallow conversation, we're not deep diving into the depths of what suicide's all about. Obviously, it can trigger us. And so just really want to suggest that you're mindful of what your needs are, please look after yourself. If you need to bow out of the call to just manage things, that's fine. If you want someone to follow up with you, maybe just drop your phone number as a private message into myself or Glenn or Robin, and we'll be happy to follow up with you afterwards. But we'll take it that you're able to manage yourself and your needs today. All right. Excellent. Down to business. So what we're going to talk about today, essentially in a nutshell, these are our 5 things we're going to breeze through. Spotting the signs. Hopefully you've got some thoughts around what some of the signs might be. How do we have the talk? And we've got a fairly simple ABC type guide for how do we actually have that talk. The question about suicide and whether or not we need to ask questions around that and how we might do that, and of course then connecting people to help as part of that as well. So I think it's good to sort of acknowledge that not all conversations necessarily end up being about suicide when someone is doing it tough, but of course it's still good to possibly name that up at some point. So for the moment, this is a short, sharp discussion. We're pretty much just going to run through the slides and run through the map that we've got in the book for how to have this conversation. So starting off with the signs that someone might be doing it tough. So what would you say might be some of those signs? Love to get some comments in the chat or 1 or 2 people sharing your thoughts with us online. Quick few thoughts about what some signs might be.
Body language.
Absolutely. Yep.
Not talking as much.
Yes. So changing in demeanor, changing in behavior.
Looking flat.
Looking flat.
Withdrawing from social interaction.
Yeah, absolutely. Withdrawing for sure. One more.
I would say it may be overworking.
Overworking.
Yep.
Yeah,
Keeping busy all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, possibly avoiding other social activities or events, just throwing themselves into the deep end. And yeah, very much that sort of change and change in focus may well be a big one. Absolutely.
Some great suggestions in the chat box as well, Jonathan. So I encourage people to follow that and check in thoughts there too.
Great, thanks for that. So I can't see the chat, so feel free to highlight anything there. I've just got not quite enough screens, probably.
Yeah, increasing alcohol and drug use, overeating, forgetting things, feeling flustered, complete lack of contact. So there's a few extra ones there too.
Yeah, fantastic. So in the guide, we've summed up these things under these sort of 3 headings. Something's happened, could be relationship struggles, financial issues, work. Something's changed. So yeah, the level of alcohol consumption possibly, or using substances, risky behaviours, something that's changed, a change in the way they're behaving, or something's not right. And this might be a little bit about what we feel in our gut as well, that there's a lack of self-care happening, feelings of hopelessness, and we might just pick up that in our own senses that something's not quite right. And I think those sorts of messages are really great to tap into and be aware of. Great, so thanks for all those suggestions. So we might get to that point of realizing something's happened, something's changed, something's not quite right, and yet our mate needs some help. It's, I think, good to acknowledge at this point that when people are struggling with whatever the issues are, it's not easy to reach out. We often hear the message, if you're doing it tough, reach out. Nothing inherently wrong with that message, but we need to acknowledge that it's actually probably the most difficult time to reach out. So this is why this idea of mates getting around each other, checking in, having those conversations and actually reaching into the person, that's why that's a big focus for this little handbook. So we've got a bit of a map for how we might have this conversation. 3 components, A, B, and C, just really trying to keep it nice and simple. So we'll unpack those briefly in a moment. But before we have that conversation, it's really good to just take a moment for ourselves and think, well, how do we want to have this conversation? What is it that I've picked up on that's leading me to want to have this conversation? Let's think about time and place, a little bit of privacy for the person. We don't want to just, start having this difficult conversation with a bunch of other people around. Is it a shoulder to shoulder or a face-to-face conversation with different people? Different contexts might be better. And just have a quick think, what is it you want to say, and what can you share with the person? What questions can you ask? So just getting your own head together and your heart together, and being a little bit ready for the conversation. Ask and listen. So this is the first of our ABCs. So how do you start this conversation? What are some thoughts that you might have around how we might start? What are some of the things that you might say in starting this conversation?
You
I
might
think,
say, oh, sorry.
no, you go.
I was going to say you just might approach it with something innocuous, like, "G'day, Alan. I just noticed you're not looking the same or not feeling the same. What's going on with you?" And a lot of guys will just say, "Oh, look, I'm all right."
Yep.
And you need to follow that up with a second and third question. You say,
Sure.
"Are you really? Are you really all right, or what's going on? You're just not the same. I've known you for a long time. There's something else.
Beautiful.
What is it? You want to go and have a quiet talk somewhere."
Great. And that idea of sharing what the fact that we've noticed something's changed, that's our stuff. They can't sort of take that away from us. If we've noticed that, that's a great thing to be able to share and start a conversation. Any other thoughts?
Personally, it could be where you notice someone struggling and you might just start a conversation and explain some stuff that's going on in your own life, or some personal experiences that are bothering you, and hopefully that opens up the channel for the individual to open up as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Sharing some of our own experiences, absolutely. Just being mindful we don't head down the rabbit hole of our own story, which can be easy to do, but yeah, short, sharp sample of something we've experienced may well be useful. One more?
I think I just add something there to that, Jonathan. And I find very much so that, people can very easily get carried away with their own agendas when they're talking to someone and asking if they're okay. But I think it's really important to acknowledge that, you're specifically centric to that person, to helping that person.
Yep.
And if you even let that kind of what some people consider to be a sort of embarrassing pause, sometimes that pause is what is actually going to help that person talk about what's on their mind.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
Spot on.
Yeah, fully agree. And, that moment of silence can be quite powerful. And I think part of the reason sometimes we might want to go down that road of our own story is it's more comfortable. So if we can kind of acknowledge that, we might be uncomfortable, but that's okay. We're probably not as uncomfortable as where the other person is. So let's try and put our stuff in the background.
Yeah, and I'll just add something to that as well. Sorry for sort of dominating the conversation. But I think it's also really important that you don't sort of automatically assume that you need to help that person by suggesting methods and solutions for them. But it's really more about, sometimes people just need to be listened to. They just need to have some airtime. They need to get things off their chest. And it's not about trying to solve their problems. And if you feel you can't solve their problems, it's not like everything is sort of, useless or anything. It's about letting them get it off their chest. That is what's going to actually make them feel a hell of a lot better when someone is listening to them and genuinely listening to them.
Brilliant. So you're absolutely right. And we're going to very much touch on that in a moment. but this ask and listen, that's what we're summing up with our first step. So yes, asking how you're doing, sharing what it is we've observed, and listening, just really being able to be there. It's a massive step. Any comments you want to throw in from the chat there, Glenn, before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, listening is critical, says Ross, which you just touched on. I love what Wayne said, just really light touch. I notice and I wonder. And John Millen there has got a nice 3-step sort of model he uses, which people should have a quick look at. Yeah, lots of great suggestions.
Cool. So really that the ask and listen can be summed up with these couple of comments. And I guess, again, this is just an image from the booklet. So much of what we've talked about, sharing what we've seen, sounds like you're doing it tough. What's going on for you? Tell me what's getting you down. Looks like you're struggling, Matt, and I'm listening. A few more tips around that. So yeah, as we've said, name up why it is we want to have this conversation. I've noticed you're not your usual self, something like that. Open questions rather than yes or no questions. So open questions that get them talking and explaining a little bit more. And yeah, listening, which we've heard. Excellent. Section B is for build a plan. And we could actually put the word together on the end of this, I feel. It's not up to us to find all the solutions, as Anthony was just saying, but if we can work with them to build a plan, often they will have some good answers in their own life. What does this prompt for you? What sorts of things might you want to say when you're having this part of the conversation around building a plan? A couple of brief thoughts.
I think it's almost like kind of trying to get them to help suggest something for themselves, because they're the only ones who know what's going on in their life. They have a lot more intimate details and intricate knowledge of what is happening to them rather than you making assumptions about their situation. So it's really important to help them build something by them suggesting what they think might be good for them. And listening, all that listening, the more you're listening, the more you're going to find out about them before you sort of make assumptions and make your mind up.
Yeah. Thanks, Anthony. One more comment from anyone? Anybody hasn't spoken yet?
I was going to say, having other resources or where else they can also seek help if they needing it, rather than feeling like it falls back on moi.
Yeah.
If you are aware where else they can get further help and assistance in a good way, so then they can choose whether they want to do that or not.
Yep, absolutely. Fantastic. So what can we do to help you tackle this? What can I do to help you get through this? But what's one thing you can do to get back on track? What's worked for you in the past when you've been struggling? So often people do have knowledge, experience, and resources. They're just not in the headspace to think of them in the moment. So just those simple questions can really help to bring those thoughts to the fore. A few more simple tips. Listening out for when there's a bit of a shift from, what's up to asking what's now. It's like we want to move into action. And for a lot of guys, it is about action. What can I actually do to change the situation? They're in a bit of a stuck place and not able to think clearly. But that question around, well, what action can we take can really often meet them where they're at. As we've said, it's not our job to give solutions. Yeah, we might share some examples. When I was going through a difficult time in my life, I reached out to this person, or this organisation was a good help for me, or my mate went through such and such. This is what we did for them. Just being mindful again that we don't get too far into our own story, and trying to avoid giving advice. As soon as we say those fantastic words of "you should," it's like a wall goes up. So talk about our experience, what we've got, what we've learned, and put it as a question. Would that work for you? Any comments, reflections on that?
Jonathan, just want to chuck in. Sorry, Alan, just want to chuck
No.
in a couple of the comments from the chat box here.
Right.
Ross says it's really, really valuable to acknowledge action that people are taking. Barbara talks about what we can do, things like offering to go with them or stay with them at any appointments they need to take. Tony offers a great open-ended question, which is, what are your options here? So yeah, some good suggestions from the chat box there. Sorry, Alan, back to you.
That's all right. You're on.
Anything you want to add there, Alan?
Oh, no, that's fine. That's
Good.
nothing important, really.
Fantastic.
I would like to add something. I think it's really important to know what kind of blog we are talking to. Is different when you're talking with your colleague. It's different when you're talking with someone who's close to your family. It's different when you're talking with someone who's quite a acquaintance and we don't have enough confidence or trust.
Yeah.
In my experience, I think it's important to empower them, even though it's going through a different tough moment. It's important to say to them yeah, it's good to ask for help, but at the same time, it's good you are taking this one with you and you are working through this one. Sometimes we don't want to be enable them in their own problems, because be vulnerable and being a man, it's a really toughest moment in our lives. So personally, I say empower them, even though it's going through a rough patch. It's quite important.
Yeah, absolutely. And often a big part of what people are feeling in this place, especially men, I think, is that sense of powerlessness, feeling like they've got no control. So the more we can ask questions that put even a small sense of control back in their hands, that's a powerful thing for sure. Interestingly, I got an Instagram video this morning shared with me of a copper who pulls over on someone's pulled over on the side of the road. This is in America. Walks up to the car. This guy's crying his hours out in the car, and he just says, "What do you need?" And the guy says, "I just need a hug." And he gets out of the car, and the copper gives him a hug. It's unbelievable. So, not saying that we necessarily need to be all about hugs. That's probably not in a way what we're suggesting, but sometimes just being there, is a massive step. All right. So on to C, which is for connect to help. And so what are your thoughts on what this might look like? How do we hold this part of the conversation, connecting people with help? A few comments?
Well, you could ask them, would they like other assistance? Would they like somewhere to go? Would they like to know where they can get further assistance, help, whatever? That depends on the situation, I guess. So that means we have to have that sort of places they can be referred to or offer it up as a follow-up, excuse me, or a suggestion.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, often, often the assumption, or traditionally or in the past, the assumption around this stuff has been that it's always about mental health issues. And of course, we know it's not. It may be practical things, financial problems, and actually talking to a financial counsellor might be something they haven't done or haven't even thought about. And that might be a part of the solution. Any other comments?
Yeah, Jonathan, I think at this point, it's really not unusual in my experience for a bloke to back away from it. So when things are really going a bit pear-shaped, they're open to chatting but once the pressure backed off a little bit, it's like, oh no, I've got control again. I'm okay from here, right? And I think it's that important time for us to continue to check in, right? So you're not going to override a bloke and say, no, you're not, but you're going to go and say, hey, look, I get it. It's really great that you're feeling good, but anytime you want a coffee or want to talk about some of the problems, right? So that they can still access further resources if they need it, right? Once a bloke feels he's back in, top of the world again, made of iron again, once the rust has fallen off.
Yep. Fantastic. Thanks, John. One more? Or any comments in the chat?
Just reposting a couple of comments from earlier, Jonathan Allen saying, actually, no, you build up your list and your knowledge of resources in your community. I think a really good point from Craig, from Wayne earlier on as well, asking the question, well, what supports, what resources do you already have? So that building that awareness and knowledge of, who in their life is a help and a support. We usually think about, what medical practitioner, the GP, but actually often, we want to know what team have they got? Is it a family member, a work colleague? Have they already got other people in their lives that they can also lean on as well as you?
Yeah.
And I think Tony Webb's got his hand up.
Yeah, Tony.
Yeah, I think it might be appropriate at this stage to simply say that one of the most powerful forms of help that a bloke can get in these circumstances is just feeling that they're not alone. And that this is where our group work really kicks in. Because when they get to put their issue in front of the group, however they choose to present it, they get so often a sense that they're not alone, that they're able then to see their own issue through the eyes of others. Getting enough distance from it enables them to think more clearly about it. That whole group process is so powerful. We've had so many guys in groups say they've taken their issues to professional counsellors and they got very little out of it. But what they get from the group has made it literally transform their lives.
Yeah.
So it's that access to a group is one of the things that's very critical in terms of being able to provide that.
Thanks,
I'm probably
Tony.
labouring a point we all understand.
Yep. Thanks,
Yeah,
Tony.
I will just add to that, if that's all right, to Tony's comments there. Absolutely, 101%. We run Dads in Distress. I run the Narara, New South Wales, Gosford campus every week. And it is astonishing where men come in and just talk about, they check in and they basically talk about what they've gone through, and listening to the others talk about their problems as well makes them actually feel like they're not alone in the world. And that is really, really key and important. Yeah.
Right. So that's great to have that reiteration, that it's not just about the clinical end of things. Obviously that has a place and can be very important for some people, but that group work or other more practical solutions. So some of the things that we might say, I'd love to check in again with you. When would that suit? Obviously, if we're going to make an offer like that, it's really important that we do follow through with it. But who else can you talk to get help with this? I've heard that these guys do a good job. Dads in Distress, they meet locally. They could be really excellent. Or the Men's Shed, whatever it might be. Or let's have a look at online and we can share a bit more about a resource around that in a moment. A few other tips around this, as we're saying, GPs, helplines, counsellors, we know all about those as well, and men's groups. So you've hit the nail on the head there, Tony and Anthony. Also, actually responding to the specific needs, and we know that stress, money, family, booze, work-related issues are often a factor in male suicidality or when they're struggling. So practical responses to those issues. And obviously services that are specifically there for men as well can be really beneficial.
Jonathan, can I just jump in? So that the timing of Tony's comment coincided with Bern Netto also commenting in the chat box separately. I've tried the numbers usually advertised on TV for men's health, and my experience has been negative. Counsellors become judgmental rather than supportive. Has anyone else experienced the same? And then Tony immediately said, we've had men's at the groups who said they've been to counsellors. So how do we wrestle with that? Because we hear this every single time. How do we wrestle with well, I've already tried, I've already tried that. I've already tried the helpline. I've already tried a counsellor. They're no good. How do we wrestle with that conundrum?
It's a really good question, I'll put it back to the group. I've got some thoughts, but I'd love to hear one or two others.
I've had that experience of blokes ringing myself because of prostate cancer issues, particularly younger men, and that's issues come up. They start delving into their past and they are wanting solutions and wanting someone to talk to someone who's been there, done that.
Mm.
And I think it's a lack of experience or life experience that some psychs and counsellors and or the helpline don't have, and they just automatically drop into the counselling mode.
Yeah.
And Anthony, I had a bloke before Easter and I put him on to Dads in Distress because I felt that could have been helpful. I've got to, now having seen you sit there, I better follow up and see how he went. But I think it's, from my experience of talking to blokes who've been there and had experience, and I'll talk about prostate cancer, younger blokes not able to get it up, feel
Yep.
completely, right out of the hole, stuck out of water sort of thing. And
Yep.
yeah, it's I think it's a lack of life experiences and talking to professionals that often is the bugbear.
Really interesting. One more before
Yeah. I think one of the things to appreciate that there's lots of tools in the toolbox, and the first tool may not be the right one. So if you do ring a 24/7 number and it's not the right tool, just to really reinforce, okay, there's more in the toolbox, and you keep trying until you get the right one that fits. And 99.9% of the time there will be a right one.
Yeah.
It just may not be the first one.
Absolutely. Thank you, Russell. Brilliant. John, you had a quick point you wanted to make. John Wenham.
In the support group I help run, we got guys dealing with medical issues. Like someone else said, many of the medicos and psychos and that are very academic and theoretical in their approach. So we try to sort of come into support groups. We tell our own stories, and guys say, I thought I was alone. I was the only one experiencing these sort of things, issues, and physical medical issues very, very quickly turn or combine with mental issues. And you've got this complex package that the guy's walking around with.
Mm.
When they hear another story, and we try to buddy guys up, it's that phone call, later on in the week, you can say to guys, look, call me. But what do you do when a guy's so down and depressed, he's pulled the doona over his head and he doesn't want to get out of bed and make a phone call?
So thanks, John. I'm going to keep us moving. So yes, try another service, even try the same service on another day. You just don't know who you're going to get. The person on the other end of the line or in the hospital that day might be having a bad day themselves. But I think that idea that keep try another service. There are lots of different services out there. Different services will work for different people. And the other thing I wanted to say is sometimes it might be that they actually do need us to help advocate for them. They may not have the right presence of mind to be able to ask the questions that need to be asked, to actually get the GP or the counsellor to really think differently about what's going on. So sometimes we could play a role in that. We need to manage how much we can do in that space, of course, at the same time.
What you said there as well, Jonathan, about try the same line again at a different time, absolutely spot on, because it's amazing how, sometimes if you're in situational distress and, you're reaching out to, say, the Black Dog Institute or mental health helpline, etc. I tried this once about 4 years ago, and I think it was sort of 8 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday, and I got a young guy who was 18 years old. I was talking to him about separation, losing time with my son. He didn't have any of that experience. He wasn't a peer in that respect. And again, not meaning to blow the trumpet for dads in distress or parents beyond breakup, mums in distress, etc. But we all have to be peers, like many of you have to be counselors and experienced people to deal with this kind of thing. And it generally is a very good idea when you've got those peers who have been through that situation, so they can give you some orientation when you're in a bad way. But you're right, Jonathan, about ringing the line at a different time, because when I rang it 3 hours later, completely different person. I got a peer, I got someone who with life experience, and you're spot on. Yeah.
Good to hear that story. Thanks for sharing that. So yeah, so there's those tips again. And remember, if we do make that offer to check in again, make sure we follow through on that. We don't want to be part of that that letdown that can happen when we don't get met.
Jonathan, I'm conscious you're trying to move this on, but I think from my point of view, there's a point that might be useful to make at this point. The most important source of help for somebody in crisis is actually within themselves.
Yep.
So often when people are in crisis, they have a sense of shame about the fact they're not coping. And it's part of our critical job is to build up that sense of pride, dignity, self-respect, that you do have those skills, you do have those resources. And that, in a sense, is what we're trying to do at all stages at our job, is to build the bloke up to the point where he's ready to reach out to somebody else.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's stress that point.
Thanks, Tony. And I'd like to sort of slightly qualify that by saying we're just a mate helping a mate here, and we might only be able to do so much. But the point I think you're really making is if we ask questions to try and draw the information out of them rather than tell them what they need to do, that's going to be far more effective and beneficial to the person. Thanks, Tony. So, yeah, talking about suicide, when to ask, how do we ask? Quick couple of thoughts and comments on this. We're starting to run out of time, so I'm going to move us on here fairly quickly. But
I guess if I reflect on the bloke I spoke to in the week, he said, I don't feel like inferring, not so much inferring not going on, but it was the way he said, I went, he's thinking of going out on the surfboard and just flipping off. So I said to him, so what does that actually mean? How does that look? So it wasn't putting him down for it. It's just opening up to let him talk a bit more about it.
That's right. Yep. And look, ultimately, we are just having a conversation. Yeah. This is not a big deal, complicated thing. At some point in the conversation, you might want to say something like this, when blokes are going through situations like you're experiencing, sometimes they think about suicide. Is that happening for you? Have you been thinking about killing yourself? The key thing is to name it up.
Yep.
Be direct, use the words suicide, ending your life, killing yourself, and then listen. And obviously, we need to be as non-judgmental in our listening and in our response as we can to just hear them where they're at. All right. And so, look, that's really the key. Now, that question in our model or in the handbook, it sort of comes up towards the end. But I'd suggest that, this is another one of those things where if your gut is telling you that this person's really struggling that badly, there's no harm in asking the question earlier as part of the ask and listen section. But for a lot of guys as well, you might have a great conversation, and it's just a good thing to do before you finish the conversation, just to really clarify, is this a situation you're in? Are you having thoughts of suicide? Because if nothing else, we're normalizing conversation around the topic of suicide, which we know is still quite significantly stigmatized. And it's showing that we're willing and able to have that conversation. Any comments, reflections on that?
I will just say that when you're talking to someone who could potentially be in that situation, having been there myself, it's really important that everyone recognizes, everyone in this industry who are helping others, to recognize the grief cycle, because there is a specific staged approach where you, upon whatever is happening in your life, there is a denial stage, which can turn for men into anger. And then it turns into a sort of bargaining phase, and then into a depression phase that can last a very, very long time before you come into the acceptance phase.
Yeah.
And trying to identify where someone is in that cycle is really, really useful, but also trying to tell them that that is a stage in terms of the mechanics of what they are going through. If you can speak in mechanical terms to guys about that, they can sort of say, wait a minute, there's a path, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. So this is a cycle I'm going through. And if they understand that a bit more, I found that when that was explained to me, it kind of helped me sort of say, okay, there's nothing right now that you have to live for, but there is a horizon out there and maybe a little light through at the end of a very dark, long tunnel.
Yeah.
It can really help.
Thanks. So yeah, look, obviously we could delve right into all sorts of different stages of change theories and psychological approaches to all this, and some other courses do that. This is just really a surface level thing, but certainly if you've got that sort of knowledge, obviously being able to share some of that can be really powerful as well. So obviously we want to connect people with support, and particularly if they have said yes, they have had thoughts of suicide, you know, it is a good idea for them to connect in with, you know, possibly a GP, but possibly some of these other phone lines as well. Even if you call one of them together to get a sense of, you know, what else is available, that could be a good way to go. If, for example, you might be on the phone having this conversation with someone and you're really worried about them coming out of the call, 000 could also be on this list, of course, and connecting emergency services and actually getting someone around might be an important part of potential solutions here as well. So look, that's pretty much our model. Before we just go on to share the resource with you, love any final comments or questions or anything, Glenn, you'd like to just refer to.
You've covered so much ground, not just you, Jonathan, but this entire group. There's so much knowledge and experience. It's been a really rich conversation. The only thing I'm taking from it right now is I wish we had another hour.
Yeah.
Can I just add on to that? The slide that you showed before, Jonathan, would it be possible at all to get Parents Beyond Breakup in there with Dads in Distress advertised? Because there is a helpline for dads in distress right across Australia. There's obviously, you know, the Dads in Distress is the much larger component of Parents Beyond Breakup, but there's a Mums in Distress as well. And that's been overturned as we speak and renewed and relaunched and refreshed. But the Dads in Distress sort of number, the helpline number and the web address, there's masses of resources, tools, you know, there's all sorts of self-help there, and meetings that people can join online, or they can come to face-to-face meetings.
So Anthony, so part of where the resource goes as well, which we'll touch on in a minute, is if you're in New South Wales, it goes to a website called Doing It Tough, which has been a partnership between Australian Men's Health Forum and Suicide Prevention Australia to develop a male-friendly sort of resource hub for men and people supporting men. We would hope that over time that will go to a national website. Within that, we do highlight specific male-friendly services like Dads in Distress, like the Men's Sheds, Mr. Perfect, and we're trying where we can to identify specific locations of those. Within the booklet, look, I'll let Glenn respond to what might be possible to add or change to the booklets, but obviously if you're going to have some of these booklets and share them with people, then, you know, stick an insert in there with some of the other more relevant local resources as well.
Yeah, I'll just say that declaration of interest. I'm on the board of Parents Beyond Breakup, so obviously I'm very pro DIDS, Anthony, and thanks for representing so well here today. And as a separated dad myself, it's an area of massive concern for me. As the Australian Men's Health Forum, we have got dozens of organisations who can make an equally strong claim, and so within this resource we've kept it simple. But what we've been trying to do, as Jonathan's pointed out, is get as many men's resources listed elsewhere. There's a couple of examples. One is a Doing It Tough website, which has got Parents Beyond Breakup on there, and Lawrence, I think Mr. Perfect's got a great directory of men's services as well, which often comes up in this conversation. So so yeah, I would love to include Dads in Distress, but then about 20 other organisations would say, why not us? And then it becomes a very different resource. So that's the chat. That's our challenge with this simple resource.
Including the prostate zone.
Exactly. Another excellent resource.
Yeah. So there's the resource on the slides. Obviously there's a QR code. If you're feeling tech savvy and you want to scan that, that'll take you to a selection of resources on the AMHF website, one of which will be the Doing It Tough handbook that you can download. I think we've probably put the link in the chat as well, so feel free to download it there. Yeah, it's definitely good to have a physical copy in your hand.
Yeah, and if I could just ask Kim to repost the link so you can download it off the website, that'd be great. Can I just jump in for a second here, Jonathan? I'd love to hear a little bit more feedback. We've got a few more minutes, but as this is the first time we've done this, in particular, we're really keen to get your feedback via survey. So I am going to pop it. We will email you this link, but I'm going to pop it in there right now in the chat box. You might want to open it up before you forget, and it'll take about 2 or 3 minutes to do a survey on today's session. It really helps us to get feedback for a whole host of reasons. I think you'll understand. Yeah, if you've got a moment now, please do it. If you don't mind. And yeah, back to you, Jonathan.
Well, look, I'll wrap up there and say thanks very much for joining us. Yeah, love to have any brief comments, reflections on how we might do this differently or better if you'd like to do that. Any other questions that you'd like to ask as well about the guide or associated topics?
I think we definitely need a longer set of time frame for this. There's a lot of subjects that are covered here and a lot of good practice being discussed, and yeah, slightly longer venue perhaps.
Sure.
I want to personally say it's been very beneficial, and I've really enjoyed talking to like-minded people here, and it's been some really great ideas. I know we've all probably gone through personal circumstances as well, so it's been really good. I feel just to be able to hear some ideas that people have that could potentially help others as well. So I do want to say thank you all for your advice and some of your suggestions today, and being open and honest with one another and being able to talk in a forum like this without any judgment.
Beautiful. Thanks, Lee.
Could I say something? Hi, everyone. I'm John, a very recently appointed new CEO of Mr. Perfect, joined here by our chair, Lawrence. And I just want to say how absolutely humbled I am to see this community here talking the way that you are about men's health is absolutely inspiring. So thank you for making this an amazing Friday morning. Thank you.
Hi, gentlemen. Sorry, my name's Jamie Hobbs. I just linked this one here. I just found the link here this morning in the Men's Health Forum on Facebook. But I'm from Geelong, and I did the Man Walk Geelong and part of Right Mate down there. I'm sort of launching one myself a little bit at the moment called The Wandering Man, where I sort of get blokes together and we just get them talking about their story and stuff like that. I launched it last Sunday and had about 20 participants, and I got a lot of great feedback about just people being able to share their story in a safe place and not feel judged. And so I'm going to sort of like work on a little bit more with those. But yeah, it's just in its early infancy, and but it's working well, and that's one thing I found, just getting them out there and talking about their story, and I'm getting a lot of, like I said, feedback and interest at the moment. But sorry, I got to the meeting late. I was working this morning, but I was just interested in that little booklet that you had before that I sent up about supporting a mate. If anyone could send me a link to that, so I could get a copy of that, or send me some of those that I could get a bit of information on, that'd be great.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we'll
in the
put a
chat
link
box.
in the chat, and I believe we've recorded this. So the whole session's been about the book essentially and how to actually sort of implement it. So get on to Glenn and Kim, and they might be able to send you a copy of the recording.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
The recording of today will be made available on the Men's Health Connected website and in the on the page where you registered, but it will take a couple of weeks possibly. The booklet, Kim has posted a link where you can download it right now for free. If anyone sees value in having a few copies of these to distribute amongst men in your community or workforce or wherever, let us know. We'd have to charge for that, but we'll make it as cheap as possible. We're not making a profit out of it, but we will need to cover printing costs.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks for the opportunity, everybody. I might hand back to you, Glenn, to wind up, and wish everybody all the best.
Thanks, Jonathan. I think you've done a fantastic job. So I really want to acknowledge you for managing to facilitate 30 people online, pretty much all of whom contributed at some point, either in the chat box or in person. And, this is a community effort. So just thanks for all your co-presenters who gave us so much information by sharing their experience. It's been a really rich conversation. Sometimes the best feedback you can get is, I wish you had longer, because the feedback you don't want is, I wish you'd said the same thing, but a lot quicker. So we'll take, we wish you had longer as positive feedback. Thanks all for your time. Please keep an eye on upcoming events on Men's Health Connected. We're going to go quiet next week because we're going to be at the National Suicide Prevention Conference. If anyone's going there, come and say hello. We've got a stand, and Jonathan and I will be there at the stand. So please come and connect if anyone is.
Where is that, Glenn?
That's in Canberra.
Canberra, right? Because I was going to say there's one on the Central Coast next Wednesday at Mingowa Recreation Centre. There's an awful lot of organisations, including Mums in Distress, Dads in Distress, Lifeline, many others going to that forum. So yeah, lots of productive stuff will be done there, hopefully.
Great, thanks, Anthony. And then Men's Health Connected will be back on May the 8th, Mate Day. We're going to be doing a whole showcase of some great men's projects that are helping to build social connection. It's one of 3 or 4 events happening that week. So keep an eye out, because details of those events will be posted very soon. But that's it for today. But one last request, if I haven't posted it enough times, please click on that link and take time to fill out the survey. I think Jonathan needs to get some great feedback, and he's big enough and strong enough to take some positive, constructive feedback too, if you've got any. But that really helps us if you can do that. That's all. Over and out. Thanks for your time, folks. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Glenn. Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thank you. Have a good weekend. Have a good weekend,
Thanks,
everybody.
guys.
Thank you.
Go well.